All right, so visual analytics, I'm on tap for that. Michael and I will be ping-ponging back and forth a little bit here. So visual analytics needs to be beautiful. Today, the table stakes have been set. If you don't have a kind of a pleasant experience in the application, the millennials and probably everybody else will just walk away and look for a different kind of tool. So historically, Spotfire has been focused on technical problem solving and industry problem solving, but about almost 2.5 years ago now, we completely reinvented the front end of Spotfire and allowed our customers now to make any kind of beautiful dashboarding experience that they would like. And we have not left behind, however, this hallmark immersive experience that Spotfire more or less invented back in 1996. We have some of the seminal patents in this area. Christopher Ahlberg, who was our founder and CEO for a number of years, came out of University of Maryland and Chalmers in Sweden, really created and invented this idea that we should use our visual cortex to explore complicated data because we have so much horsepower up there. We want to build a system that lets us take advantage of that to visualize and ask and answer questions. Now, smart, it means that the system shouldn't just sit there and wait for you to click buttons. Instead, it should anticipate your needs and perhaps make some suggestions, or as we call them, recommendations, for how you might want to visualize the data or transform and wrangle the data, and a variety of other things that we'll get into in a few moments. Of course, we all work in teams these days. We want to collaborate. And as I alluded to in the previous slide, we want to be able to configure the application to solve different kinds of business problems. Spotfire grew up in industry. We had our first major chunk of value delivered to the pharmaceutical business, working with chemists and bioinformaticians, moved into upstream oil and gas, high-tech manufacturing, telecommunications. We grew up solving hard problems in industry, and it's only within the last, say, 6 or 7 years that we've turned to be a more horizontal technology to look at any and all kinds of data. So there's no way that we could solve genomics problems and also solve biostratigraphy problems in oil and gas if the technology wasn't configurable enough to solve industry-specific use cases. So smart visual analytics, what's the kind of state of the art today? We have recommendation-driven insights. This is a patent-pending technology that others are poorly imitating these days. And I'll give you an example of that and show you a demo in just moments from now. We do have this idea of multiple dynamic perspectives. And this is not the old school kind of single-page dashboarding experience where you make a graph, put it away, make another graph, put it away, make another graph, put it away, move to dashboarding, bring them all in, wire them together, and then ha-ha, ta-da, I'm done, right? No, our idea is that you should be looking at the data from multiple angles continuously, not to confuse you, and you don't have to be faced with 10,000 screens at the same time, but you do want to naturally look at some information, find an interesting insight, drill down and immediately create another page or another graphic on that same page without having to switch gears and move to some other part of the application to do so. Yes, sir, question?
Question about immersive and smart visual analytics. Are you guys, as a future, exploring virtual reality as another mode of delivery?
That's a great question. We've been talking about it in the hallways. Actually, I was in Sweden where our primary kind of engineering team sits last week, and we have our annual so-called do-it days, where the engineers get 2 days to build whatever the heck they want. And we did have a team that did some work in that area. It's quite interesting. I don't know. I mean, you kind of have to have the equipment deployed pretty widely before it makes sense to make an investment here to allow people to use that equipment. So it's debatable. I mean, it's a very interesting area, and it could very well be one of those interfaces.
I'd like to discuss that with you offline.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be good. So we do have an in-memory engine, and we have been a pioneer and an innovator in this area. We believe we have the highest performance in-memory engine around of commercial technologies. And we also do out-of-memory data analysis so that we can push the queries down into databases and NoSQL systems and big data systems equally well. Rich multi-layer accurate maps, threaded conversations, process-specific applications, as I mentioned before, and then on the topic of data, as I mentioned, in-memory and in data source, but over 40 different data sources of all different flavors, shapes, and sizes, and you can mash up those data sources in that visual immersive environment.
Are you actually physically moving the data into your in-memory environment?
If we do in-memory analysis, then yes, that's kind of how we define the in-memory analysis.
It stays in place.
That's right. So we also do in-data source, so we pitch the queries down to the data source, and that is often quite useful for data sources like Spark that are themselves in memory, because this immersive experience really breaks down if you have to wait 10 minutes for the query to come back. So that, oftentimes, just connecting directly to a big Hadoop system, although you certainly can do it, those tools were really more built for batch jobs, and it's only with the more recent kinds of capabilities that that gets to be a more interesting immersive experience. But not only do we do in memory and in database, but we have a hybrid model called on demand, whereby you might look in a NoSQL system and have that big iron do the aggregation for you and get a high level, say, bar chart or single visualization to show those results, and then click on a bar and drill down and actually extract a subset of the results, or drill across to another related data source using the information that you gained from that in database. So we can have as many data tables in memory or out of memory as you like, and all different kinds of relationships among and between them. And again, don't go crazy. Usually people will have one or two data sets that make sense in an application, but you can certainly do more than that.
Okay, thanks.
My pleasure. So it's time for a demo, guys. Enough talking from me.
Yay!
Let's switch over and take a look. Actually, just one kind of editorial comment. The way we've structured this is we're going to introduce each of these objects. What is it that we're talking about, and what's our particular slant on it, and then do a demonstration, and then follow up with a customer story that particularly supports that use case. So let me jump over here into Spotfire. So this is a very, very simple dashboard in Spotfire, and I just want to kind of acclimate people that all of the things that you expect to see and do in a dashboard are here. For example, I have a simple pie chart, bar chart, and a scatter plot with some regression lines on it. And by the way, this is loyalty program information, so it's kind of sales over time of product categories, pretty approachable data. If I mark a couple of sections of the pie, notice that all of the graphs respond. Now, they don't have to, but typically in the way that Spotfire works, all of the graphs are linked to one another all of the time. So you don't have to separately set up brush linking or set up these relationships. They just occur automatically, and then you can override them and do things differently if you choose to do so. And I might drill down and select a couple of cities, and then now look at that scatter plot here for just those couple of cities. And I could see perhaps by looking at the regression lines that, what is this plot down here? This is the total purchase amount on the y-axis versus the number of purchases on the x-axis. So I might have people that make lots of little purchases, or some other folks who make the occasional big purchase. And then up here, the upper right corner is people who come all the time and spend lots of money. They're a perfect customer for this particular organization. So I might segment these here by gender in this case, and see that perhaps in Los Angeles, the behavior of the female shoppers is a little bit different than the male shoppers as compared to a much more similar profile in Boston. Right?
We do have a question. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Sure. A question from Jorge Garcia. What is Tibco's position regarding the provision of smart recommendations? It was a slide previously, so that's why I wanted to get it in here. How far or not far to avoid bias?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'm going to talk about that in just maybe one more minute. Okay. So I'll hold that thought and I'll come back.
Hold on to this question.
It's a great question, though, very interesting and topical question. So then, of course, we have the ever-present filters. Now, this is some of the original patent area for Spotfire. We automatically inspect the data types and the data distribution and so on when we open that information, and automatically create the appropriate filter for you for either 10 data values or 10,000 data values. We have semiconductor companies that literally look at 10,000 attributes at the same time in Spotfire. So it doesn't make any sense to explicitly go and set a filter when we could create all of those filters for you automatically, and you can simply hide them or bring them to the fore as you see fit. So I can make a filter, I can drag it across, everything is dynamic as you have come to expect. As I said before, this was Spotfire in 1996 when others were still writing SQL statements, right? So then, now just a couple of more steps here with the basics of visualizations. We have a relatively new chart here that we call the KPI chart. And it is what, as you expect, it shows you your kind of key numbers, key performance indicators. These can also include spark lines and so on. But what I wanted to point out here is that these charts are explicitly optimized for consumption in mobile devices. So it's a little bit difficult for me to show you my phone at this moment, but if I click on this one, not only do I drill down into that particular category, which happened to be, or that particular region, which happens to be Boston here. But now I've also navigated to another page where I have another set of KPIs for each specific category of interest. And as a user, I can go and select any of these different categories, and you can see obviously the KPIs change. Now what's interesting here is this KPI chart is natively responsive. So this works very, very well on a mobile device to keep up to date with what's going on with your business. And then the application will remember where you were when you come back to your desk and you want to start there from your analysis. Here I can see there's not a lot of 10-year-olds buying furniture, not too unexpected. And I've got an alert condition specified here, when I drop below a certain average kind of sale value. Now then, I want to go now to the recommendations topic, so we'll just jump to that right now.
Okay.
Okay, so the concept here with recommendations is that we primarily are aiming at helping new users get started more quickly. So very often our users are extremely knowledgeable about their business, but not everybody is born knowing how to twiddle query devices and use the Spotfire application. But oftentimes, business professionals will have this mindset that they'll know it when they see it, right? They're trying to make a particular kind of graph, but they don't necessarily know all of the buttons to push to get there. So if I simply click the recommended visualizations and then pick out the data that I'm interested in, perhaps I'll be interested in my total purchase amount and by business location. Now when I do so, Spotfire is going to actually render my data using some best practice heuristics and show me actual graphs of my data, a gallery of them with different analytical views that might be appropriate for me, from which I can choose. So where others show a thumbnail, you might want to use a bar chart. We actually allow you to see the graphs themselves. So here's like a waterfall plot or a line chart, and they're ranked in order of best practices that we've learned over the years, and also in consultation with industry luminaries that we frequently communicate with. So for example, I might choose this total by business location, and then perhaps I might switch it out and instead say I want to look at total purchase by category, and let me see here. Join, business location, maybe gender, and I can pick a pie chart, and then perhaps maybe I'll pick a couple of different groups here, and business location and age group, and maybe then I'll be suggested to create a heat map. Right, so the idea here is I pick the data that I'm interested in, and Spotfire recommends best practice heuristics for which kinds of charts might be appropriate for that, and then I merely select them, and now I have a kind of fully fledged dashboard available to me that's still responsive to the filters, and brush linking and everything is already there in place. Right, so it's more or less 10 or 20 seconds to a dashboard. Now, of course, I might want to dive in and kind of fine-tune and refine this application, but we want people to get started quickly. And maybe one more comment is that even for if you will, old hand users like myself, it's actually much faster to create a visualization when the system already takes an educated guess about settings that you might normally use. And although Spotfire natively does that with each individual graph, to be able to do that across a gallery and then pick one is actually quite extraordinarily faster than doing all of these clicks by hand.
So the answer to Jorge's question then is basically what I just heard you say. The system takes an educated guess, delivers up a few examples of how you can, and then you choose which one is best for your
That's right.
purposes.
So the user is still in charge. But we make suggestions and a gallery from which the user can choose, and that has been extremely well received by our customer base. Now I'm going to, just about 2 more minutes here, I mentioned the idea of creating an analytic application. So this data is appropriate for perhaps a marketing analysis, and this is a kind of classical way of looking at marketing data, the so-called RFM analysis, recency, frequency, and monetary. So what we've done is created some controls on the screen to allow the user again to input the factors that they're interested in, and we've made some percentile, I guess quintile in this case, calculations here, and I've got so the total purchase amount, or whichever amount that I choose, is on the x-axis here, the monetary score. So 5 is higher, so people are purchasing more. And then on the y-axis, I have recency. And then this down low here is the customers who visit us most frequently. And then the bars themselves are, the x-axis is frequency, and the bars themselves are monetary score. So the idea is those looking for the kind of heat map, the areas where the bars are taller in this lower right-hand corner, these are going to be my highest value customers, right? So it's a simple ranking across 3 different measures displayed graphically, and then the controls allow the user to say, well, I don't want to look at the total purchase. I want to run a campaign around electronics. So if I choose electronics, then I get a completely different reconfigured set of calculations and visual indications. So I might choose, but let me go back to total for now. And then, by the way, we've taken each of those 3 scores and multiplied them to get an aggregate score, so I can simply take one swipe at it and get now my most valuable customers in my loyalty program. And I want to select them and then refine them further to optimize a marketing campaign for those guys. So here's the list. But by the way, this particular application has been configured to take this subset of now high-value customers and move them into the next part of the analysis, which is now a clustering analysis. So I want to use some clustering technologies to segment my customers and identify clusters that are interesting to me. I've already picked my high-value customers, and now I want to look at their kind of different ways that they spend across different categories. So maybe I want to ignore groceries, but I want to pick garden, furniture, electronics, and toys. And again, the clusters are automatically computed and visually displayed. So I can see here's a group of people which buys a lot of furniture, and others groups here that rank down. Here's a group that buys a lot of electronics, but not so much toys. So I might click on each of these clusters, and now I've refined a different set of customers that I might want to push into my marketing automation system. Now, in our user conference in May, I actually pushed it into Marketo and sent an email to members of the audience. I won't do that here. But the system is designed with APIs, which Michael will talk about, to reach out into third-party systems and actually put these learnings into practice and into operation in my business.
That's pretty slick, I have to admit. I'm impressed with your capabilities here. Very nice.
So we kind of start simple, and then you can kind of go deep pretty quickly if you want. But all along here, I've not shown you any statistical consoles. The clustering is a built-in visual indicator, so I can right-click on any line chart and then cluster or find similar profiles. There's a lot of statistical functionality built right into the product. And Michael is going to, in a little bit later on, going to talk in a bit more detail about all of the different places where predictive capabilities surface in the environment. So with that, let's transition back to the slides.
And while we're switching over, let me open it up. Does anybody have a question on the phone or a comment about what you just saw? Oh, Mustafa, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about a recommendation engine. In fact, it seems definitely a great idea for the users. However, sometimes recommendation engine may react not according to what we want from our data. So sometimes instead of bringing the sales volume or stock quantity, it may bring some currency amount, which we don't want initially in our graphics. So my question is it possible to help to recommendation engine giving some common facts about our data, just to come up more accurate visualization?
Yeah, so that's kind of a two-part question, or you made a point and asked a question.
Good question.
So the first, to address the first point, the way our recommendation engine works is the user specifies the data that you're interested in. So the system, at least in that mode, won't bring in data that you haven't explicitly said you want to take a look at. Right, so that's one thing. The other thing is you asked the question of how can I get kind of maybe descriptive statistics or kind of get a look at the data, a survey of the data before deciding where I want to go, and we're going to talk about that in the data wrangling section, and we absolutely can do that as well. So it's great questions.